in the research there is now increasing focus not only on the overall concept of well-being or adjustment, but on typologies of symptoms. So one wants to know how different symptoms go together. That brings a bit more in-depth understanding of how children feel about their lives, of how fine they are in their skin. And so most previous research focused either on internalizing or externalizing problems. So internalizing problems are actually feelings of depression and anxiety, while externalizing problems are feelings of aggression and conduct disorder, as well as hyperactivity. And these are quite important problems and indicators of well-being, because they're very often also indicated with medicalization. And already children as early as 3 years, they're given medication against particular attention deficit disorder, and there are these increasing concerns about increasing rates of diagnosis of these problems. But there is, up to now, very little attention to comorbidity, i.e. to what extent do these symptoms go together. They have different types of treatments. And so one wants to know how the symptoms go together. And also there is very little knowledge about how they develop over time, i.e. how is the well-being of children developing over time. And also what are the associated risk factors, and there I will take into account also the socioeconomic circumstances and the family situation. And also there is generally little attention to gender differences, except that there are, girls are generally more likely to experience internalizing problems and boys more the externalizing problems. And we heard yesterday that girls are also reporting lower levels and life satisfaction than boys. So there are these differences, and can we identify distinct antecedents or risk factors that are associated with gender differences in experience. So the aim of this presentation, it is very new research, current research, because one of the topics was also current research. So this is current research examining developing profiles of co-occurring internalizing and externalizing symptoms between ages 3 and 11, not 5, in a general population sample. And also we take into account, so it's a joint paper, you have seen the authors, which involve Leslie Goodman, Heather Joshi and Michael Parsonage. And we also look at the similar antecedents and risk factors predicting these profiles, i.e. family background, family structure, maternal characteristics, parent-child interactions, and child characteristics. So quite a lot of components are looked at. And how is, in this case, mental disorder defined? And we use, for this case, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is generally used. And again, it has this characterization of internalizing problems as experience distress inwardly, and externalizing problems express distress outwardly. And generally these disorders are assessed by a diagnostic threshold, and that is generally, you can define it by a population where you identify, for example, where is a clinical threshold, i.e. when does a kid, for example, need medicalization or anything. And, but sometimes in academic discourse you simply also have a different diagnostic threshold, let's say the top 10% or one standard deviation above the mean, let's say. And in summary, regarding the antecedents, the parental socioeconomic factors are significant risk factors across all these risk patterns, in particular regarding the high IE symptoms. And other key risk factors are maternal depression, perceived conflict in parent-child relationships, because they all are associated with increased scores, and potential beneficial effects of having older siblings, of having a warm parent-child relationship, regularity and cognitive ability, that they all can initiate a positive cycle of striving. And maybe these are factors one should focus on. Then we have potential differential effects regarding this homotypic comorbidity, that females are potentially more sensitive to socioeconomic stress, while boys are more sensitive to conflict between parents or parenting behaviors. And we also find that developmental delay is so the physical development is a significant risk factor for moderate internalizing and high IE trajectories. And generally girls are less likely in this troubled group than boys, but gender does not predict higher internalizing problems. So also boys have an increased risk of, or potential risk of being in this internalizing group. And in conclusion, if you want to understand how symptoms together, this latent profile analysis or latent class analysis, this range of methods are quite useful to identify what different groups do we have in the population, which can be quite important if you have national population data regarding information about need for resources to support children, i.e. what resources are needed actually to support positive development, and the general risk factors where we should invest in include socioeconomic background, i.e. particular housing, so investment in housing, and support for parents who are mothers in particular who are distressed, i.e. parental depression, so not just focus on the child but focus on the family and support the mothers instead of blaming them, and also to maybe have some parent training to avoid this parent-child conflict and give them some ways of how to mediate conflict maybe more appropriately, and maybe just advise parents to have regular feeding and sleeping times, because that would calm them down. And other risk factors that were specific to groups are then symptoms that are sensitive to specific constellations of risk. In particular, we have seen that these internalizing problems are already indicated maybe by early adaptability of the child, in particular the girl. And generally we see that the proximal factors, i.e. parental depression and the parent-child interactions, show a stronger effect than the more distal factors, i.e. the sociodemographics. And